so happy to be here. I was a spectator here about a couple years ago when Chris Mullin was inducted, and I envisioned myself someone calling my name to be up here. And I don't have to envision that anymore. It has come to light. And thank you. I'm just so proud to be here, and I'm going to enjoy this weekend. Thanks.
You are locked into the Cowbell Kingdom podcast, frontline coverage of the Sacramento Kings. Now, here are your hosts, Jonathan Santiago and James Ham.
Welcome to the Cowbell Kingdom podcast. I am James Ham. Alongside me, Mr. Jonathan Santiago, back from his travels in Las Vegas. We are joined by Mr. Scott Howard Cooper of NBA.com, who is in Springfield, Massachusetts, getting ready for the Hall of Fame induction ceremonies. Scott, how's everything going out there?
Things are good. It's a very exciting time. We did one of the events today, and the weather is very, very nice, which is important because there's an outdoor arrival ceremony leading up to the Symphony Hall tomorrow, so it's all looking very positive.
What is it like being there for this type of setup where they have all of these, the pomp and circumstance of being enshrined into the Hall of Fame?
It's very fun. It's the kind of thing, everyone's in a good mood, obviously. You're celebrating the accomplishments of people, and it's a chance for some of these people, the enshrinees, to reconnect, because sometimes former Hall of Famers will show up. It's a chance for them to see former teammates, opponents, coaches. It's obviously very upbeat, and there's times that it's downright magical. I know that a few years ago, that when you sort of looked up on stage at the end as they were taking the group picture, and even beforehand when everybody's walking the red carpet and going in before the ceremony, you're sort of looking around thinking this may be one of the greatest collections of basketball talent in one room ever. And that's pretty impressive to be able to say that. Now, we're not saying that this year. It doesn't compare to the group that they've had in the past, but it's still very special because there's going to be a lot of big names here, not only being inducted, but the people who come to support them, and that's a lot of what makes it fun. It's not just the people of the moment themselves, but the crowd that they bring as well.
Scott, the Sacramento Kings have two players with history with the franchise who are being inducted into the Hall of Fame this weekend. Most notably, Mitch Richmond, a long overdue award for him, recognition for him. Just being around Mitch these last few days or so, what's your read on how excited he is to finally have this moment in the sun?
Mitch tries to keep it cool. He's never been a guy on the court that was somebody that was like Gary Payton, that he would get in your face, and not like a Vlade Divac that you knew every emotion he was thinking at every minute of every day, just demonstrative. Mitch, certainly much more low-key, but he's got a smile on his face an awful lot of the time, and I think that's very telling. I know that he's been working on his speech for a while because he wants it to be really good. There's a lot of people he wants to thank, and he understands the importance in the big picture, and that is that this is about more than him. He understands that these things don't happen very often in Kings history, and I think that that's part of the wave that he's riding right now. Is there's a great deal of energy that he's bringing from Sacramento. He's excited about what this means for the city, for the franchise, as well as for him, obviously. I think it's probably impossible to think exactly what it means unless you've been in that spot of having put in all the hours of all the years that these guys did since they were young to get to this point. It's a great source of pride, so there's obviously that. But I think Mitch has got a special boost going right now because he understands what it means to a lot of people.
Another one of the inductees in this year's Hall of Fame is former NBA Commissioner David Stern. Is he kind of just laying low right now? Obviously, I'm sure a lot of people would love to get his thoughts on everything that's going on the NBA right now. But I mean, from what you've seen from him, is he just kind of trying to fly as under the radar as possible during this whole ceremonious event?
I think that not just this ceremony, but for the last several months, when they announced in February that the finalists in some categories, such as Mitch's, when he was named a finalist in the North American category, and David Stern was among the handful of people that was announced that he was elected, that he was definitely going in. He skipped that because he didn't want to show up at All-Star Weekend. He just left the office, and he didn't want to be seen as stepping on Adam Silver's toes. So he's been very conscious about staying out of the spotlight. He is here for this event, and he has been doing a few media availabilities over the last couple weeks leading up to this for stories that have now started to come out the last week or two. He did do a group session today. I did not sit in on it because somebody else did for us. But I know that he's been doing different things. He's been trying to get some vacation. He's looks like he's lost a lot of weight. He had surgery, so he's temporarily walking part of the time with a cane right now, but I also saw him walking without it, so I think it's getting better. So I think you have the right read that he's not going to be the guy that steals Joe.
Not to go sideways on this conversation, but are you surprised, Scott, the way that David Stern stepped away and then really let Adam Silver take sort of baptism by fire over all of the events that have happened over the last, 6 months, this Sterling situation, all of the negativity that Adam Silver really has almost galvanized the league and really put himself up there with what's happened through all of this. Are you surprised that he stepped away and didn't jump back in and help out through that?
No, because I think he realized that if he had gotten into being a backseat driver, that would only cause difficulty. And for one thing, he likes Adam Silver very much personally and respects the heck out of him professionally, so he doesn't want to make his first few months as a commissioner more difficult by being the guy that is just sort of shouting from the peanut gallery, because that would only encourage it to happen more. And I think probably David would agree with most everything that Adam has done, so it's not like he would be critical, but at some point he may not agree. And then David's a guy that sort of speaks his mind, and so somebody might call him up and say, what do you think about this situation? And he might say, well, I would have done it differently, and then it throws another log onto whatever fire is going at that moment. So no, I'm not surprised. I think that this is the tact you're going to be seeing. He may start to show up at an All-Star game in the future, or one or two games of an NBA final or something like that, but I don't think you're ever going to see him being the guy that is weighing in on issues.
Clearly, John intended for David Stern to be the second Sacramento King that's being inducted after all that he's done to keep the team in Sacramento. But realistically, the Kings have another player that played for them that is going into the Hall of Fame, Sarunas Marciulionis, going in for his international what he's done for the league and the game of basketball internationally. How has Marciulionis been, and sort of what's the vibe with him there?
I think it's almost as if he's blown away. I talked to him a week and a half ago or so, and then I visited with him briefly again today walking around the hall. And he has so many people coming at him, and I think he's still taken aback by the honor. He keeps talking about what a shock it is and how it's unexpected, and now he's about to get up there tomorrow and go into the Hall of Fame. And it's a great thing. It's phenomenal to see what it means to him, the way it's touched him, and how much he appreciates it. And let's face it, he sacrificed so much to get here. His story is so unique because when we talk about what guys like Mitch Richmond and everyone else has sacrificed, that's in terms of the hours and the practice and the dedication. That's what we are used to seeing in the United States. But Sarunas' story, of course, is much different in that he risked so much to come to the NBA in the first place. And this is his happy ending. And I think he's sort of in awe of the whole thing, and it's really neat to see.
We were talking to Scott Howard Cooper of NBA.com from Springfield, Massachusetts, covering the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame ceremony this year, 2014. Scott, Chris Mullin is going to be the presenter for both Sarunas and Mitch Richmond, obviously having played with both those guys in Golden State. How excited do you think he is for those guys to finally get some recognition from the Hall of Fame?
I think he's probably more excited than when he went in himself, and I think he's more excited for them than to have to be up on stage again. That's obviously not Chris's thing. He'll do fine with it. He can handle the attention, but he's certainly not somebody that craves it. I think he enjoys the behind the scenes, the camaraderie and the friendship with these guys much more than having to get dressed up and put on tight-fitting shoes and get up there on stage and stand there off to the side. But there's no question that he's been rooting for Mitch for a long time, and like everybody, he's thrilled for Sarunas because Sarunas is one of the all-time good people, good teammates. I think the only thing that would have made it more complete for Chris is if Tim Hardaway got in as well. He was a finalist this year and missed, but certainly is a very realistic candidate for the future. But I think Chris Mullin loves these moments because he's so happy for his friends.
You know what, Scott? We don't want to keep you all day. We know you got a busy weekend with all of the festivities there, but Mitch Richmond is the first Sacramento King to make it to the Hall of Fame, which to me, honestly, I thought watching him as a player, he had a shot, but I'm slightly surprised. Are you caught off guard that he's the first? And what do you think the chances are of Chris Webber and Vlade Divac getting the same honor somewhere down the road?
Certainly possible. I think that Vlade deserves serious consideration the same way that Sarunas got in through the international committee. His NBA career certainly does not merit Hall of Fame. He's good and the talent and certainly about the nicest guy you'll ever meet. So it's certainly somebody worth rooting for, but he would have to get into the international committee. And Chris would have a chance as well. I think that he would sort of be in that same situation that Mitch Richmond was for a couple of years, that you could make a very credible case, but it's not like you would say, okay, yeah, for sure, he's an automatic. It would be some interesting debate with Chris, I think.
Excellent. Well, Scott, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. We know you're super busy this weekend. You got writing to do. You've got a lot of events to cover, but thanks for taking the time with us.
Always a pleasure. It's a fun thing to be here.
John, it's been a busy week. It's been a busy, crazy week. We have the Mitch Richmond induction ceremony. Again, thank you to Scott Howard Cooper from NBA.com for stopping by. John, I thought Scott was really good. And not that Scott isn't always really good. He is always really good. But I thought you felt sort of like how important the Hall of Fame induction is for these people, for these players, and also for someone who's covering it, just how much you do get into it because all of the big names come out. It's such an important thing for these guys to finally get that recognition, that final recognition as basketball players. I thought that was really good.
Yeah, he painted a different picture than what we're accustomed to, when we have Scott on the podcast.
Yes.
And yeah, like you said, it's a culmination of just so many years of work. We've talked to Mitch multiple times already about his induction into the Hall of Fame. I've talked to Chris Mullin about Mitch getting into the Hall of Fame, and this is it. I mean, this is as big as an NBA championship and probably even a little bit bigger than an NBA title for some of these guys because, for not everyone gets to win a championship in the NBA. Mitch did win a ring with the Los Angeles Lakers in 2002, but it wasn't as a featured player on that team. But, I think it means a lot more to Mitch knowing, he always talks about it, and you heard it in the clip that we played before we started the interview with Scott, and that there was probably a little bit of doubt on his side, knowing that he was a great player on a bad team for a very, very long time, and for the Hall of Fame to recognize that, hey, this guy was indeed one of the best shooting guards of the 1990s, of that era of basketball, despite playing on a team that did not play for anything besides one playoff appearance in his 6 or 7 seasons with the franchise. It really does mean a lot for somebody like Mitch Richmond.
Yeah, and I think it's a great thing that Mitch did get in. I do believe, watching Mitch for all those years, that he did deserve to be in. But you're always going to look at win-loss record, and that's always going to hurt a player like Mitch Richmond. He's not the only guy who's been hurt by that, but certainly playing for the Sacramento Kings and having that atrocious record for so many years, it's just really difficult. It tells you how good Mitch was. And I know Michael Jordan, talked about Mitch Richmond being the second best shooting guard in the NBA behind Jordan himself. But it's good to see Mitch get take that step. And I know that the Kings are so excited because Mitch is part of the franchise now. He is a part owner. He does do some scouting work. I don't know. He does have an official job title, but I can't remember what it is.
Director of Pro Personnel.
Oh, there it is. There it is. So, I think this is a great moment for Sacramento. It's that moment where one of your guys, after so many dreadful years, one of your guys gets recognized. And I do think that Weber is a Hall of Famer, and I do think that Vlade Divac, for his international play and for all the things that he's meant for basketball overseas, I do believe he gets in eventually as well. But this is, it could be a long time until the Sacramento Kings have another Hall of Famer, even if those two get in. I mean, after that, there's going to be a huge gap. I mean, it's not like Kevin Martin's getting a Hall of Fame induction. No. It's not like Francisco Garcia is going to get the call. So, yeah, it's a good weekend for Sacramento.
Yeah, and I think for Mitch Richmond to get in, we didn't have the pleasure of covering Mitch, obviously, during his heyday, but the times that we've gotten to be around Mitch these last few years, with him being a finalist, one of the finalists in 2013 when I first met him in Houston, and then this year, and now him being part of the franchise, he's just a good dude. I mean,
yeah,
seriously,
we've got to hang out with him. Yeah, we've got to hang out with him quite a few times.
He's just, what you want and what you needed in a superstar player. Just not only was he a guy who was going to bring it on the court each and every night, but as a person and as a man, I mean, just great with the fans and great with people in general. And that's the kind of guy that you wanted representing your franchise. And it is a little bit of a shame that, of course, his era predated the Twitter social media universe that we live in these days. But not many people, obviously, outside of Sacramento really knew much about Mitch, and obviously the diehard NBA basketball fans. But he's just such a good guy. He's a very down to earth gentleman, and for somebody like that who put in so much hard work throughout his career and into his craft, it's a well deserved honor for him to finally be inducted into the Hall of Fame. So congratulations to Mitch Richmond.
Yeah, definitely. Now, John, we have another player who's fighting for a big-time spot as well. DeMarcus Cousins is doing everything in his power to try to make Team USA. We've heard rumblings that Mason Plumlee may make the team over him. We've heard, all of these things. But, I don't know about you, but listening to the phone calls with Mike Krzyzewski and with Jerry Colangelo, I get the feeling that DeMarcus Cousins is on like the strangest bubble of all time. You know what I'm saying? It's like either he's going to make the team and almost star for the team as one of the major rotational players, like especially since Paul George is out.
Yeah.
Or he's not going to make the team. That's what it feels like to me. Maybe I'm wrong there, but I get that if he's not going to be a core 8 or a core 7 through 9, then he's probably not going to be one of the 3 or 4 bench players. because they're going to look for specialists for those positions, and the other guys are better at specializing in specific things like running the floor, playing defense. Kenneth Faried rebounding, Kyle Korver shooting the three ball. Specialists. So, John, am I wrong? Do you think I'm off base with that assumption?
Yeah, I know a couple days ago before you wrote that piece, we kind of had a little discussion about that, and I was, of a differing opinion than you. But, after reading what you had wrote and kind of looking over the roster, I've changed my opinion, and I do agree with you more so now that, yeah, he probably does have to make it into the core. And in fact, I mean, if you look at it right now, like if I had to pick a starting lineup for Team USA right now, I would go with the Warriors backcourt, because you lose Paul George. He was going to be your best perimeter defender in that lineup. Now that he's out, Klay Thompson is probably their best perimeter defender left. I would have James Harden come off the bench as a six-man. He's played that role before, obviously, in Oklahoma City, so I don't think it would be hard for him to do as a scorer for Team USA. But I would start Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, have Kevin Durant start at small forward, his natural position, Anthony Davis at power forward, his natural position, and start DeMarcus Cousins at center with the injury to Paul George. Now, Mike Krzyzewski said that the injury to Paul George didn't have any real bearing on the bigs position and where DeMarcus stands on the team, but I think that to me would be the lineup I would go with as far as starters are concerned. And I think DeMarcus, he's done everything he's supposed to so far in this training camp. Of course, the history is always going to be there. As much as he doesn't like to hear that, his history as a player and as a person is always going to come up, and he's always going to be fighting from behind. But he's done enough, I think, to merit serious consideration to make the team. He's in phenomenal shape. Everybody had fantastic things to say about him when I was in Las Vegas last week at the USA basketball mini camp. He's playing at a great level right now, and if anything, if he doesn't make it, you hope that he takes back a lot of the things that he's been working on this offseason back to Sacramento. Hope he's been spending a lot of time with Kevin Durant. And that's great for him, because I think Kevin Durant can teach him a lot about being a leader, being a better leader for his team. And so, yeah, I really do believe DeMarcus Cousins deserves to make this team. I think, you look at the bigs that they do have in the mix right now. You have Kenneth Faried, you have Anthony Davis, you have Mason Plumlee, Andre Drummond, and DeMarcus. The four other bigs outside of Cousins, they all kind of bring the same thing to the table.
Yeah, just different versions.
Yeah, they're all different versions of like the rebounding, effort, defensive-minded type of big. Whereas DeMarcus, I think he can do that. We talked about it last week in the podcast in terms of DeMarcus being able to, I think, be a better defender in the international game with the way the rules are structured in FIBA versus the NBA game. But he also brings you a low post presence. He can score down low when you need an easy bucket. He can pass out of the low post. He can pass out of the high post. And he brings a big body again. And I think this upcoming friendly exhibition against Brazil may be the deciding point, I think, for whether or not he makes the team, because that's going to be the real test for USA to see, okay, can we hang with a smaller lineup, or do we really need DeMarcus against, the Thiago Splitters, Anderson Varejãos, and Nenés from Brazil, and of course in Spain with Marc Gasol and Pau Gasol as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree that the true test is going to be, can Team USA play without him? Can they get through without a low post presence? Are those other players that we've talked about? I know Andre Drummond is strong enough. Are the other players that they have in camp strong enough to hold off the big offensive players? Again, Splitter's not a big-time offensive player, but, man, Nene, even at his age, he still can do it. Varejão and Splitter are guys you have to keep off the glass. I don't know that if you bring in Mason Plumlee, he may be athletic, but I don't think that they can fight those guys off in the post. And the finals, everything is going to be played for Spain. I mean, that's who you have to build this team to play against. They're going to run over almost everybody else. We all know that. That's what they do every single time. But Spain is so incredibly difficult. They have so much athleticism and strength and big, again, you got the Gasol brothers, you've got Serge Ibaka. I mean, that is a really, really big team. And if Team USA goes in there and thinks that, Kevin Durant and Pau Gasol are going to match up well, I don't think that that's the case. And you're going to, again, it's international play. You only get 5 fouls. If I'm those teams, I go right at the post against Team USA. Feed the post, get Durant out of the game, or make it so he's got to switch positions so he stops picking up fouls. And I don't know if that's what they're going to do, but again, we've talked about this a lot. I have a tough time seeing Team USA without DeMarcus Cousins at this point, just because I do think that it's time. It's time for him to get his shot to shine and to go in there and actually play. I don't think that he works as a bench player for this team, but I do think he works as a major, major cog.
Yeah, I think he's paid his dues. He obviously is. He'll be the first one to admit, hey, I've made mistakes in the past and I've done dumb things in the past. But at the same time, I think he is, he's ready. And I think, I really found it interesting when I asked DeMarcus at Team USA training camp, one of the first days, I asked him, what about that first year under Michael Malone has helped you prepare for this moment to perhaps make this World Cup roster? And he really he emphasized the defense and the schemes that Michael Malone runs in his, as a coach of the Sacramento Kings, as to what has helped him prepare for this moment. And that's that's not a surprise. I mean, you've got 2 coaches there who have on Team USA staff who have very close connections to Michael Malone, and Monty Williams and Tom Thibodeau. Tom Thibodeau obviously running a very similar defensive scheme and set that Michael Malone tries to run in Sacramento. Those 2 spending time together under Jeff Van Gundy in New York. And so, I think DeMarcus, for what he lacks on the defensive end in the NBA game, I think he'll be fine in the international game, just because he's a guy who, when you don't have to worry about defensive 3 seconds in the key, he can hang out there and just kind of camp out in the paint and kind of, trouble the opposing offenses with his length. And again, he's a big body, and you need size against teams like Spain and Brazil. And of course, we talk about Andre Drummond as a guy who, probably fits Coach K's philosophy of wanting to run up and down the floor more. He's more athletic than DeMarcus, but at the same time, where DeMarcus has a bigger advantage over Andre Drummond is the fact that he's more experienced, and he's Andre Drummond is still learning the game as we speak at this moment. He's very young, he's very raw, whereas DeMarcus Cousins, he has 4 years of NBA experience plus a year of college seasoning under his belt. Andre Drummond's been in the league for 2 seasons and had 1 year at UConn, so he's still learning the game. And I think, if you're looking at let's get a big body, you bring in DeMarcus Cousins because he already has that experience. I think he's got to really prove that he can run up and down the floor. And, you got a chance to see that scrimmage, and he was doing that.
He was, but he got burnt by Plumlee in the second half right away. When they did match up, I know a lot of Kings fans freaked out when I think it was Brian Windhorst and Stein co-wrote a piece and said that, Plumlee, when he came in the second half of that and he was matched up against DeMarcus Cousins, that he outplayed DeMarcus Cousins. Honestly, I agree with that. I agree that for a 3-minute stretch that Plumlee was running up and down the court and Cousins was nowhere to be found and gave up 2 wide open dunks to Plumlee. And you saw why it is that Plumlee is even being considered. I think when Plumlee was playing in the first half with a different group of players, he just completely disappeared. But what I saw in that overall, if I'm looking at that game as an overall, sort of collective, the showcase game, I thought that Cousins and Durant played so well together and off each other. And as soon as you took them out of the game, their team got ran over. They just got killed. And that's what you wanted to see if you're DeMarcus Cousins. You want a spot on that team. You wanted to show that you can play alongside a guy like Durant and that you can, flourish in that situation. And I thought he did. I thought he played really, really well. And that told me that he's really set on this team. If the decision goes for him to be there, he's set as the third big. He may not be starting, but he's the third big. It's going to be Durant, it's going to be Anthony Davis, and it's going to be DeMarcus Cousins, in my opinion. Just watching it purely from a basketball standpoint, that looked like what would work. And I guess we'll have to wait and see. So, John, the Sacramento Kings also had their own player movement this week. We got to see finally some thinning of the front line. Quincy Acee, who had extended until August 15th his deal, the decision on whether his contract would be picked up for next season was extended. Travis Outlaw, a guy who the Kings picked up on a waiver claim with an amnesty waiver claim a couple of years ago and really never played up to his previous skill level. Those guys are packaged. They're moved to the New York Knicks for Wayne Ellington, Jeremy Tyler, and some fooling around with a 2016 second-round pick. So, John, what do you see from that trade? And do you think this was a redistribution of the roster, or do you see this was just a way for them to get some players and then waive them and clear some cap space?
I think I see it as a way for them to obviously, lift those restrictions on that 2016 second-round pick. It was protected from 31 to 37. Now it's just fully unprotected, which is good for them. And we saw this coming. Quincy had a phenomenal summer league performance for the Sacramento Kings. He was credited as being like the heart and soul for that championship team that we saw in Las Vegas. But realistically, there was no more room for Quincy on this team, despite his salary being very reasonable for the last year of his second round pick deal. Just under a shade of $1 million is what he's owed this year. So I think it's for the Knicks, they're picking up a guy who can help them bring some energy and bring some rebounding and some toughness to their roster. And he's versatile too. He showed that he can shoot the outside jumper with the Kings in Summer League. And again, he just didn't really. They have so many bigs right now that they needed to find a way to clear that glut. They had just signed Eric Moreland a week ago, and Eric Moreland, granted, he's not NBA ready as Quincy Acee is at this point in their careers, but he brings something different to the table than what the other bigs that they have. And that's the problem that the Kings have right now, is that you got a lot of bigs who aren't bad players. Carl Landry, if he can regain his form that he had with the Golden State Warriors, he's obviously a scoring threat from the low post for you. Obviously, I still like him better coming off the bench for the Sacramento Kings. Jason Thompson, we've talked about it numerous times. He's a good player. It's just that he's a duplicate piece in what you already have in DeMarcus Cousins. They kind of do the same exact thing. But as the roster stands right now, Jason Thompson is still probably your starting power forward.
Or Reggie Evans.
Or Reggie Evans. And that's another guy. Reggie Evans and Quincy Acee kind of do the same exact thing. They bring a lot of energy, a lot of hustle. I think Reggie obviously is a much better rebounder at this point.
And Acee's a better shooter.
Yeah, and Acee's a better shooter. But it wasn't a surprise to me that they made this move, just because knowing that really realistically there wasn't any more room for Quincy on this roster.
Yeah, and you have to look at the addition of Omri Caspi, which we've already said this, but that's coming. And so Omri Caspi and Travis Outlaw, basically the same type of player. And actually I saw some things that Caspi wasn't actually that bad on the defensive end last year. I was surprised to hear that. So that's an interesting thing that Caspi might be able to actually hold his own a little bit on the defensive end. And so if you're going into this season, again, you still have so many players that can play the power forward position. Rudy Gay, Derek Williams, Caspi,
Yeah.
Evans, Thompson, Landry, Moreland. I mean, just keep stacking them up. They can play the positions. It's really too bad. If the Kings weren't so, if their roster wasn't so robust, I kind of like Wayne Ellington as like a reserve too that can help out with a younger player who's been in the league, for 4 or 5 years. He's played for a bunch of teams, but more because it was a victim of circumstance and trades more than anything else. He can really shoot the 3 ball, but I guess what we're learning is that because Travis Outlaw's contract was signed in the previous CBA, that he was not eligible to be. This is at least what I've seen on the internet, that he was not eligible for the stretch provision, and Ellington is, and so that's why they swapped those 2 players, because the Knicks can buy out Travis Outlaw if they want and just give him $3 million, but they can't stretch that over 3 years. Where Ellington can be stretched and basically save the Kings $1.9 million this season off the salary cap. And it'll get them a little bit down closer underneath the luxury tax, which is something that they were hoping to do with all of this stuff. So, John, I'm not surprised that this deal happened. In the grand scheme of things, it works out to be a very, very, very minor deal. We're talking about 12, 13 guy, 14 guy on the end of your bench for the same thing for another team. And even in a different world, I kind of like Jeremy Tyler as well. He's athletic. He can do a lot of things as a backup center, but he's not sticking around. I mean, he just doesn't. It's not what they want. It's not what the Kings want. They're going to move forward, and I think I like that we at least saw some shuffling, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, this roster is still a long way to me from being finished, and it would be quite disappointing if we get to training camp on October 1st and this is the roster that they have. I mean, I think the Kings are still trying to make as many moves as they can to
Yes.
unload and clear up the glut that they have at that 4 or 5 position. But it's a minor move, but it's a move that had to be made, and there's still many more, I think, that have to be done in order for the Kings to be a more competitive team next year, because they still are in search of the right pieces at this point. They don't have the right pieces, I think, to surround their core 2 of Rudy Gay and DeMarcus Cousins quite yet.
Yeah, John, and I want to see quality, not quantity.
Yeah.
I don't care how many trades. I mean, to me at this point, they've made a lot of trades already. A lot of trades. Let's start getting the right pieces, not the piece that hopefully will lead to a piece that hopefully leads to a piece. And I guess you got to build that way too, but, the right pieces, we need to see some quality in these deals as much as, the number of deals that they actually commit to. So I don't know, John, I think that's going to do it for this episode of the Cowbell Kingdom podcast. Do you have anything else?
I think that's all. On a final note, we should mention, though, that it seems like the Kings are moving full steam ahead here with this opportunity to perhaps bring Major League Soccer here to Sacramento. Yep. So that's another feather in the cap of the Kings ownership group and Mayor Kevin Johnson. If they can continue the development of downtown, you're hearing possibilities of a soccer stadium being built in the rail yards where the arena was supposed to be originally planned to be built. So that's a big move there if they can get expansion done and guaranteed here for a new soccer team in Sacramento.
Yeah, John, and just so people know, there is a ton of land out at Arco as well. The Sleep Train Arco property, the city owned 80 acres there attached to the 120 that was already there. So there's like 200 acres sitting there, and I know that there's a lot of talk about a campus for Kaiser Hospital going in, a monster campus there, a medical campus, and that's awesome. But there's still plenty of room for soccer out there too. I know they want to figure out what's going on in the rail yards, but those soccer stadiums are a lot less expensive. They are a lot easier to get put together and thrown up. We're looking at $100 million, maybe $110 million for a really nice soccer stadium versus, $477 million for the new arena. They go up relatively quick, and usually the way that those are financed are 2/3 private and 1/3 public. The public money is a really easy rubber stamp from city council, just to do like a $30 million bond. And those bonds will be backed by the city of Sacramento's credit, but also by the proceeds of the stadium itself. So it's a really low risk a deal for the city of Sacramento if they do jump in and help build a stadium. So I think this can actually move pretty quickly. Yeah, we'll see what happens. I expect them to hear relatively quick if they're going to get an expansion team or if they're going to get a relocation team, there is a possibility of that as well. So this is wild, wild west here in Sacramento, trying to grow the brand of the city of Sacramento, and really get your name out there in different avenues, including now it looks like MLS.
Yeah, I think it would be fun too. We've been to a couple of the Republic
It's
FC
a good time.
games.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge soccer fan, but I'm always a sucker for the sporting experience. I love going to sporting events. It's fun for me not having to go covering a game every once in a while, and we get to go out with a couple friends here and there, and it's a very fun experience. And if they can bring Major League Soccer out here, there's no question that the Sacramento fan base, we've written about it before. You wrote a story about it before, that the fans here in Sacramento, the sporting fans will embrace, a new team, a new franchise here as much as they have embraced the Sacramento Kings in the past. All right, on that note, let's wrap up this edition of the Cowbell Kingdom podcast. Thanks again to Scott Howard Cooper for joining us earlier to talk about Mitch Richmond and also the 2014 Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. And we'll be back with another episode of the Cowbell Kingdom podcast next week. So for James Ham, I'm Jonathan Santiago. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of the Cowbell Kingdom podcast.